Hey guys, it's JT and I'm bringing you another chess mistake video. Today's mistake comes out of the Sicilian defense, and it began with my opponent playing pawn to e4 and me responding pawn to c5. Now at this point my opponent played something you'll actually see relatively often in low-rated blitz games, but it's not a good move in terms of actual sound play. It can work well because it throws your opponent off, but it's not a good move. And that move was queen to h5. So this does a couple of things. First off, it pretty much scares your opponent. It brings out the queen really early. It makes your opponent deal with this threat. But if you just take it easy, you should be able to play against this pretty soundly. A lot of people's first reaction will be to threaten the queen by maybe bringing the knight out or bringing the pawn up. But those both leave this c5 pawn undefended. So one of the better moves in this position is simply to bring up to d6. This is a normal line in the Sicilian defense anyway. You'll see this when you lead up to the open Sicilian. You'll see this in a lot of variations. So this is a normal move. He hasn't really done anything at this point to hinder my development. I'm pretty much just setting up into a familiar position, whereas he has to deal with now the fact that his queen can come under attack in the next few moves. So now he brought his bishop up to c4, putting some pressure on this f7 square. Note that if I don't do something about it, he can easily win a pawn here, and then after my king moves, he can kind of tear up my back ranks a little bit. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to defend against that if I don't do something to stop it now. And the easiest way, the most sound way, is probably to come to g6. This attacks the queen and stops its line to this f7 square. So it's a pretty effective defense. And also it opens up a square for me to fianchetto this bishop if I decide to. I don't in this game, but it does open up that possibility. So he comes over here to continue pressuring this f7 square. Note that again, if I don't do something about it, the same problem I'll run into. So now I just attack his queen again. He pulls it back, and I've developed a knight. So you'll see he's done very little to develop. His pawns are still pretty much blocking in this bishop. His pieces are pretty much undeveloped, whereas I've got mobility for a little bit of mobility for both my bishops. One of my knights is out, and my pawns are staking more of a control of the center than his are. So I've got a decent position here. So anyway, he brings his queen over to c3, attacking this rook. So I simply bring my pawn up to block off its diagonal. The pawn is defended by this queen and this knight, so he can't take it with his queen or he'll lose his queen. So he pushed to a3. I think he did this to block off this square for my knight to kind of keep it where it is. But he didn't. It's not a very effective move because my knight still has this square, this square. It still has a lot of options. So I just pushed forward, attacking his bishop right here, the light squared bishop. He captures and I recaptured. Note that he can't capture this pawn now and win a pawn because it's simply defended. So he brings it here to pin the knight down to my king. So I just push forward and continue attacking his queen. This is one of the disadvantages of bringing out your queen early because it can come under heavy attack pretty quickly. So he moves it over here where he thinks it's safe, but I just develop a piece and continue the onslaught of attacks on the queen. This is where the problems for him really start coming in, because now not only does he have to respond to the queen's threats that I've been doing, but now he has to fall behind in development because I'm going to start bringing in all my pieces to try and develop and maybe trap his queen at some point. So he moves it over there, attacking this undefended, or this pawn that's defended by this knight. So this knight can't do much. The queen is defending, but anyway, I do bring my knight over, which does leave this pawn undefended for now, I believe. Yeah, this pawn is currently undefended. So this wasn't a great move for me, but he didn't notice. He just came here to attack in the center, and I exchanged off because I'm ahead in development here. So I figured opening up the board would be a decent idea. So he recaptured with his queen. Note that this is still an undefended pawn that's being attacked, and I now noticed it. So I castled. This unpins this knight, and it protects this pawn with this rook. So now he starts to decide that it's time to develop. But I push up here to allow this dark squared bishop to some mobility, because as it stands, it's pretty much pinned down to the defense of this pawn, because if I move it, he can just come in. But now that I've done this, the pawn has another defender. So he castles, and I push forward to attack his light squared bishop. He pulls back, and I attack his queen with my knight. He pushes forward, attacking this undefended knight now, so I simply bring my bishop up and defend it. And now all my minor pieces have been developed. They've got decent claim over the center, and he has a pretty significant disadvantage at this point. So he pushes forward like this, and I revealed this attack, opening up this diagonal. It might have been better here to just bring the knight up here, because then I would have been attacking the rook and opening up a revealed attack, but I didn't do that. Instead, I just did this revealed attack to continue making the queen move and try to make him make a mistake in defending his queen. So he moved it back, and I developed my queen, lending some support to this bishop and connecting my rooks. So my development at this point is complete. And we're not too far from the end of the game at this point, because the attacks that I'm setting up for are going to be pretty lethal to my opponent. So he captures, and I recapture with my bishop. I briefly considered recapturing with the pawn, but I decided that capturing with the bishop puts some pressure on the diagonal here with the king, and it puts the bishop opposite the king, which can lead to a nice little attack on the castle position. So I captured with the bishop. He came here attacking this knight, I think is what his plan was. And I attacked his queen again. He moved his queen out of the way, opening up a nice little diagonal right here for me. And here I brought my knight up here, attacking the queen again. He captured, I recaptured, and now his rook is under attack, and this revealed diagonal is still a threat. He doesn't really respond to these threats very well, so I just came up. He comes up and develops as another piece, threatening this knight. So I simply brought my knight up here, attacking his queen and threatening this rook. So he has to deal with one of these threats. He can either save his rook and lose his queen, or save his queen and lose his rook. And neither is a good option, really, but he makes the right one and saves his queen. I grab the rook, he recaptures, and now a nice little tactic came in. I took his knight. Technically, that knight was undefended. I know you're thinking, well, you know, the bishop can be captured by the pawn, but I'm gonna wait and see if you guys can figure out what black should do at this point if the pawn does capture the bishop. You can pause the video if you want. And I'll wait. Okay, hopefully what you came up with was queen to d1, which is checkmate. This is in fact what happened in the game. He didn't see this line. He didn't see the fact that if he moved this pawn, it's checkmate. So he did go ahead and capture the bishop. And even now, if he doesn't go ahead and capture there, he doesn't have a lot of good options. The computer suggests that he move his bishop up to protect his rook, and then his bishop will fall. There's just a lot of things that aren't very, very good here for him. So he did, but the worst move he could have made was taking with his d pawn, which did lead to checkmate in one. So guys, don't bring out your queen too early. I know you hear that all the time, but hopefully this was a pretty illustrative example of why it's bad, because at the end of the game, he still had virtually no development. He spent the whole game running his queen away from my pieces. Yes, it can work. This tactic can work well against beginners, but if you get someone who's willing to just sit and wait and look for what move is actually correct in a position, you're going to have a bad game if you bring your queen out too early. So guys, I'm JT, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.